Thanks for tuning in and welcome to Marketing Bites, Restaurant Growth Unwrapped. I'm your host, Brian Siemienas, the Vice President of Restaurant Solutions for Nift. Today, I welcome our guest, Carl Orsbourn, SVP of Food, Hospitality, and Retail at Invisible, as well as a best-selling author. Welcome, Carl.
Hey, Brian, how are you doing today?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
I can't complain. Always glad to have some time with you, sir, and having a good chat. So looking forward to today's conversation.
Yeah, well, always looking forward to you. Plus, I love the accent. So, spending many time in my past at Hard Rock Days and in the across the pond, I love talking with you, not only for the content, but love the accent as well.
I practice it every day. I practice it every day for you.
Yeah. So speaking of love, your background, and it's one, love loyalty, not only in restaurant and hospitality, but also when it comes to employment. You started your career back in London with BP for 18 years, working your way from business analyst to the head of retail for AM/PM. And you also had stints as VP of operations at Kitchen United and COO of Juicer. How has your background shaped you as we sit here today talking?
Well, I've got a really different background, I think, in comparison to many, because I've been in the big companies and seen, BP was awesome in the sense of it shaping a lot of my education about from a professional perspective. The fact they brought me across to the US a couple of times, they put me through my MBA at London Business School. But then in the last kind of few years, Brian, it's been more of the startup scene, right? So you mentioned Kitchen United, that was a Series A startup just before, ghost kitchens really were known. A lot of my focus there was about how can we use technology to really help shape a business without necessarily pouring lots and lots of labor into it. And then obviously founding my own startup and with Ashwin over at Juicer and getting into that space around dynamic pricing. And guess what? Dynamic pricing was something I used to lead over in the UK when we were pricing gasoline in the UK market. So it's weird, how many little similarities you get in different verticals, in different roles. And I guess the main thing I would say is that when you don't become a master of one particular skill set or a master of one particular industry, is it keeps you humble for starters. And then the second thing is it keeps you curious. And it means you have to really shape yourself around asking the right questions. Usually I like to sit in your seat asking the good questions. It's the answers I sometimes might struggle with. But that piece of it, I think is super important. Of course, when you then write a few books and you've got that kind of curiosity slant about yourself, and you have that piece around not always feeling completely sure that you've got the answer, it means you seek out the right people in the industry and you be able to get the right collaboration of different views to provide a unique perspective. And that's pretty much what I've taken, into my career today. And of course, now with Invisible, the world of artificial intelligence, all the questions out there around, well, how can I use this thing really to help me drive bottom line for my business? That's exactly what I'm doing. And of course, I'm tying it together, both on my retail exposure, my restaurant exposure, and also technology experience as well. So it's coming together in a nice little sweet spot.
So, Carl, at the peak of COVID in May 2020, you decided, you had your job, but you weren't satisfied. So delivering the digital restaurant was born. How did it come about? Certainly you've published multiple books, but it's much more than books. So did you expect it to get to where it is today?
Okay. The world of ghost kitchens was fantastic because I was speaking to executives like yourself, Brian. I don't think we met back then, but I was, speaking to folks like you across all the big restaurant chains in the States and a lot of independent restaurant owner operators. And of course, at that point, we were talking about ghost kitchens and that context within the off-premise world. But the bigger picture here was there's this entire new channel, this e-commerce channel, if you want to call it that, for restaurants that hardly anyone, apart from the routine kind of pizza restaurants and perhaps some of the kind of ethnic cuisine types, were really playing into with a full level of focus. And it really just struck me. I remember saying to Meredith, my co-author, I said, why don't we get our customers, our prospects, a book that helps them understand why their consumers in restaurants are demanding to be able to have these additional ways to be able to, engage with restaurants through delivery or takeout. And Meredith said to me at the time, said, great idea, Carl, go onto Amazon, get a bunch of books, we'll sort it. And I think that's where she thought the book journey would end, quite honestly, Brian, but that wasn't the case. What ended up happening was I looked on Amazon and no such book existed. Right, you'll see Danny's book about service and all the rest of it, and there's a few others out there, but nothing specifically focused on delivery and the digitization of our industry. So after we left Kitchen United, we both went about writing this book, interviewed over 100 or so executives, both on the restaurant side and the technology side, to be able to tell the story as to why this is something to take seriously. And then the book came out, as you said, at the peak of COVID. Every restaurant now is a ghost kitchen. Every restaurant has to embrace e-commerce, and a good chunk of those folks have got not the first clue how to approach it. So weirdly, for someone who had spent his entire career, apart from my time at Kitchen United, in the convenience store retail environment, I was now having to think about, okay, well, how can I, reposition myself, my own personal brand? And this book really helped because now I was going across the world speaking about digitization of the industry. And this book was basically a resource to help people figure out why they had to take it seriously and some of the steps that they need to think about to really put it into action. The second book came out in 2023, which was an accompaniment to the first book. It was called The Path to Digital Maturity under the same name of Delivering the Digital Restaurant. But it was really about the how to the first book's why. And in that, we talked about the steps that folks need to think through in terms of navigating what it really takes to be able to become a more digitally mature restaurant.
So I think we, definitely as you talk about Kitchen United, we could have our lengthy discussion between, my time at Reef and on that whole ghost kitchen space. But let's on this one stick with technology, and we'll revisit that and probably over a cold one as well with that topic. But as we look at technology today, it's just so overwhelming, for so many people, whether you're a marketer, whether you're an operator. We're also starting to see some pushback on all the costs of the systems a restaurant needs. Again, $50 here, $75 a month here. Well, when you start adding the tech stack in an industry with such small margins, we're really starting to see people getting fed up. What's the approach that you recommend involving the tech stack to have the maximum impact on a restaurant's business?
Well, for starters, it's not just the technology leader's job. If you're really establishing a true tech stack to take your restaurant to the next level, it's got to be something that every member of the leadership team in your restaurant group have to think about. So it's a collective view. We've got to stop treating tech and tech stack development as the CTO or the CIO's job to be able to go and find something and insert it into the restaurant and everything's going to be fine, because that just does not happen. I think the average amount of technologies that a restaurant group has today is somewhere between 15 and 20. And that in its own right adds some real challenge, not only into the operating part of the business, because that's lots of additional systems to train your people on, which in a high turnover environment makes it increasingly difficult to help each of those new pieces of technology be utilized in the way that they were perhaps sold and intended to be utilized. But then also the way in which those technology systems work together to be able to help the business really get the maximum level of impact. So the way in which we articulate it in the second book, as I say, The Path to Digital Maturity, is really about recognizing this is a marathon, not a sprint. It used to be that, right, when everything was a bit of a shotgun effect during COVID, where everyone just had to try and find something super quick. But now you've got to be able to implement new technologies into your business at the pace at which your business is ready to absorb them and to utilize them. So, we were talking earlier about ghost kitchens, virtual brands, right? If you haven't got your marketing capabilities in place, where you're clear on how you're targeting and how perhaps you're utilizing marketing campaigns on your primary vehicle of maybe third party or maybe your first party channel, then it makes no sense to add the complexity of these other kind of vehicles to be able to help perhaps maximize revenue further or drive greater efficiencies through the ghost kitchen model until you've got those basics sorted. So it really is a case, and in the book we have worksheets at the back of each chapter to really help people figure out which stage they're at, and from that then be able to determine, okay, how do I focus on that particular section, get great at that before moving on to the next level of maturity.
So you recently had a great article called SaaS Got Us Here, but Holistic Reasoning Will Take Us to the Next Level. You identify the problem isn't the systems, but the lack of seamless integration. How did we get to this point, and can you share the solution you identified in the article?
Yeah, it's It's an article that I've been meaning to write for a while. I posted it on LinkedIn, and I'll probably talk about it as well on my own podcast, the Digital Restaurant. But the idea of it is it comes back to what I was just saying. We've got all these SaaS tools. The SaaSification of our industry has really enabled the smaller businesses out there to be able to have capabilities that 10 years ago they just would never have dreamt of. It'll just be the big chains. So in that sense, SaaS has been really powerful because it has democratized the level of capability that restaurants have been able to have access to. And of course, you can understand why lots of restaurant leaders that perhaps are a bit more tech savvy have kind of really thrown themselves into it. But then when you end up with all of these systems, which ultimately need to integrate to maybe a point of sale or other kind of systems, you have to rely upon APIs. Now, APIs, by their very nature, in a very simplistic kind of layman's term, are the ability for one system to talk to another system. But it's quite binary, right? And that challenge means you have that API set up to be able to support with a specific purpose, maybe a bit of data transfer or something attributed to both systems for data storage purposes. But what I talk about in the article is the need of being able to get a web of interdependently connected systems, and to do that, what we really have to do is think about the way in which data is being harnessed, being tagged, being labeled in our businesses. And then from there, not even thinking about software as a solution anymore, but actually thinking of AI and agentic workflows being a solution. Another way of thinking about that, Brian, is think of us going down the restaurant technology shopping aisle of a nearby conference. And we're taking all these things off the shelf. Now, when we insert those into our business, because they are kind of fully framed, we have to, in some way, shape, or form, adjust our business around that technology package. But what about thinking of it in a different way? What about being able to say, no, this is the most optimal process workflow that I need for my business today? And actually asking AI and the agentic workflows that I talk about in the article to be able to undertake that process in the way that you want it done. And then if you can do that at a process level, then you can start to be able to say, well, how can I start to interconnect these forms of data? And I use plenty of different articles, references in the article on what that could look like. Things like let's talk about a marketing thing for a moment. You know, a piece of customer feedback today. Now, customer feedback might go into your restaurant group as a bit of operational feedback. It might be managed by the marketing team for being able to talk about the latest LTO release or something. But what if that piece of feedback could actually have some seamless level of integration across every touch point of the business, whereby it perhaps influences the digital marketing spend going forwards, or maybe into a specific location, or maybe it's something attributed to the way in which training have introduced the production of a certain LTO item, or maybe it's something to do with the fact that actually we're finding this particular new LTO is taking longer to make, so therefore the staff scheduling needs to be able to be updated. Imagine all of those different things being able to be improved instantly through having these types of interconnected workflows. That's the exciting future we're heading towards. But it starts by being able to figure out data and cleaning that data up.
So you talk about cleaning up the data, and there's some early instances. I was fortunate, worked with a company called Red Onion. Part of the what you talked about is we were able to, through programs, see did it drive incrementality and feed in some of our insights from consumers to find out if they didn't do enough of a star. Was there consistency among what was ordering? Was it a specific cook or person on the line that was there? As we get more and more, and the big buzz is all about first party data. But while AI will be able to help that, you're seeing resources in marketing teams, whether it's staffing cut down, budgets cut down. How much of that is still going to be relevant versus AI will be able to help and do all of that?
I think it's going to be relevant to a point. I mean, the need state is still completely there, right? In the sense of being able to better utilize those data points to be able to make better decisions. But we've got to almost, and I said this at a conference last year, we've got to stop treating AI like a tool, right? Like another piece of SaaS. It's more of
Mm-hmm.
an infrastructure play across your entire business. And if you think of it through that lens, I think I said at the conference, it's not like you say, I'm going to deploy a new customer service software platform, right? No, you have to think about customer service across every touch point in your organization. And if you think of that AI in the context of, well, how do we get better at customer service as a restaurant group? Then you start to think about everything from your culture to your training to the way in which you hire people. All the things that could potentially impact customer service need an entire level of thinking attributed to it. AI and its ability to be truly harnessed is going to be approached in the same way.
One of the things I love talking about with you, Carl, is you're at the leading edge of all of this, and I just love hearing. We'll get a little bit later into your drone, discussion, but as you look out there in the industry, who's an example of someone that's at that cutting edge that you would say, boy, they may not have solved it, but they're on the right path. They're doing a good job with what's available and using the AI from a marketing standpoint or their business in general.
Um, the folks often look at right now, I mean, there are, of course, the big groups, the Wingstops of this world that are certainly harnessing off-premise and doing things really well from that standpoint, Chick-fil-A and the like. But let's talk about a name of someone that perhaps hasn't got a huge amount of attention. I think they still have less than 10 units, but Goop, Goop Foods, which is the Gwyneth Paltrow group. Now, they operate entirely out of cloud kitchens. Um, they have an incredible food offering, so the food quality is crazily good. The marketing focus that they have in terms of deploying very specific marketing techniques to target the right profile of customer that perhaps is going to pay a little bit more than you would for the average kind of food delivery, but is also getting a packaging solution that's incredibly enticing, a customer connection and loyalty element that's really enticing, and also just a sense of value. As in, value often gets attributed to cheap prices, but a customer that's purchasing from Goop is coming time and time again because of the value that they seek that they're actually getting from their experience. And I think it's also to do with the fact that every aspect of the experience is being addressed from an off-premise context, right? So the food is being delivered at the right temp, it's being delivered within its promised time, it's being delivered in a kind of good unboxing kind of occasion. What Goop Food are doing, I think, is a representation of choosing your lane appropriately. And that's a company, therefore, that says, now we're going to embrace e-commerce fully. We're going to hire the right people that are trying to do things in that space, that have got experience in that space. And we'll also, therefore, choose not to do the things that it's perhaps not, set up to do. And I think that's one of the big challenges out there right now for those folks that are becoming somewhat more mature is that to really become a truly digitally mature restaurant group, you have to kind of choose a lane, right? At some point, you have to maybe decide, do I, promise a better experience for my on-premise guests, or is my off-premise business far more important to me? And because a lot of the big restaurant groups out there today that have obviously overlaid off-premise and is now a significant channel into their business have had to deploy both together, they've got all these operating system conflicts that create a level of poorer experience, both for their teams and ultimately for their customers. And that is a challenge. And I think it's no better that's seen than in the casual dining environment, right? Where you've seen that come to life. And again, in the back end of the path to digital maturity, we say you're going to have to make a choice at some point. And actually, maybe for those restaurants that don't want to embrace technology, there's going to be an opportunity for them to really focus in on creating a much higher, better experiential experience that perhaps doesn't touch on technology so much, certainly inside the restaurant, and certainly doesn't perhaps embrace off-premise in the same way. And I think that's okay. I mean, we all love the restaurant dining out experience. And so it really is a case of being able to, I think, figure out who you want to be, and then when you do it, go all in and go after it in that direction.
Okay. On an episode of Digital Restaurant this fall, just thoroughly enjoyed it. You had a great discussion, and Meredith wouldn't say it, but I will. To drone or not to drone? For those who did not hear the episode, can you share your perspective on where drone delivery is and an update of the partnership between Serve and Wing that you talked about?
Yeah. Um, well, high level for starters, when we look at the overall value proposition of delivery, just generally, the biggest value drain, and the reason why we have such high kind of charges across third-party delivery as well is because of the cost that comes from delivery. It's just really difficult to be able to have a really value efficient transaction, regardless of who and where it's actually happening and who's taking money from whom. To be able to really do it well, it's difficult to be able to do when someone has to come and drive perhaps 10 minutes, to wait for 10 minutes, to then deliver for 15 minutes, and for that person to get a decent wage when they're basically perhaps at best getting 1.52 deliveries an hour. That is, in essence, one of the biggest challenges when it comes to being able to do delivery well. Now, of course, you've got the cluster trucks of this world and the folks that have been able to really optimize the connection between driver and the kitchen team itself, and fire times being appropriated to when the actual driver's turning up, and being able to perhaps get things like four deliveries, maybe 5 deliveries an hour. But really, what this is all pointing towards, Brian, is the ability for us to be able to get perhaps humans out of the loop, and therefore utilizing technology. And so, whether that be a drone in terms of in the air, or these kind of robots, these sidewalk robots, being able to support, there are plenty of solutions out there that I think are getting true momentum, especially this year as well. When you look at Wing that and the ability for them to be able to fly and, through a drone package, the fact that they are working quite extensively with the likes of Walmart right now, and being able to take packages to people's homes through that device from the top of a Walmart building, really exciting. But the challenge with the Wing model and what I talked about in the past is that, well, how do you create a space in a restaurant to be able to have this place where a drone can land and can depart from a restaurant, right? I mean, you think about the design challenges. Are we going to be climbing onto the roofs of our restaurants and sending these things off? It doesn't seem operationally viable, which is why this partnership that you mentioned between Serve and Wing really drew my attention, because Serve is more positioned around very much in the kind of 1-2 mile kind of area, highly dense urban environments whereby something is put inside a robot and that robot goes off and travels a certain miles per hour to be able to then deliver to someone relatively close by. But what Serve and Wing have figured out is, well, what if Serve can actually take that package, take it to one of these dispatch points for Wing, and then send it out from there? That I think is a really interesting way of these two kind of mechanisms working together. Now, whether the economics of it are going to work together, I think time will tell. But we need to get better at being able to find more autonomous ways of being able to address delivery. That doesn't mean we're going to move away from bikes and cars and people getting involved in delivery where it makes most sense. But I think in the next few years, we're going to see some real optimization happen to be able to say, given the density of what we've seen from your delivery transactions, that you have this percentage within half a mile, this percentage within a mile away, and actually this other big percentage here, which is 5 miles away. That's where you need to be able to have multiple solutions to be able to deliver in the most efficient fashion. And if you can do that, and you've got services like Serve and Wing out there that are offering solutions to it, I think that's something to be excited about, because what it will address is being able to help delivery become more value orientated and therefore hopefully drive more transactions as a result.
Yeah. So you touched upon third party delivery, and I sort of feel that they've almost become sort of a punching bag of the industry. The high rates that are charged to smaller chains and independents, the execution problems you mentioned, if there's traffic, by the time the food gets to you, what time does it get to you? And ultimately the price that consumers are paying. And you're right, whether it's Uber, whether it's DoorDash, Grubhub, they're for profits, and we know the cost of that labor and everything, as you explain why drones are so exciting. But from a consumer standpoint, I thought the recent announcement by Darden, and they're working with Uber, with Olive Garden, really was eye opening. Of they're going to be charging the same prices as in the restaurants. Darden's going to maintain the relationship on data, and ultimately the consumer pays for the delivery with full transparency. Of what, I don't want to go pick it up. Here's what the costs are. So be it. Do you think this maybe could be a trend as other big companies start renegotiating of, having, which I think full transparency to consumers is always good, especially for brands that people don't know, because otherwise it just looks so expensive and overpriced.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a deal that Darden have done with Uber Direct, right? So this is about allowing Darden to have a first-party channel, but utilizing Uber's delivery force. So in that sense, if someone goes to olivegarden.com and completes an order, they're able to have a delivery solution without Darden having to figure out their own logistics solutions for that. And so therefore, that kind of ability for them to charge the same price, I think, is absolutely the right direction. But on the same end, being able to give the customer that kind of transparency also really helpful so that they're aware of the delivery cost. Here's the rub. Um, is the Uber direct driver really going to be the most optimal delivery driver for that particular transaction? Right? There's still a certain amount of Uber drivers in that area willing to take a job on. And so what I'm kind of excited about is where you start to see the restaurant groups, yes, perhaps have a relationship with Uber Direct, but they also have relationships with other logistics solutions. I mean, we just talked about the drones, right? So it's also about being able to have a mechanism to make sure the most efficient channel is used and therefore the customer is getting the best price possible. Because as we know, on Uber's side, they are always making decisions there. I mean, their algorithms in the background are making decisions to maximize the margin that they can get from their delivery fleet. So I think, yes, it's certainly helpful for restaurant groups to embrace things like Uber Direct if they're not going to deploy their own logistics solutions themselves. I think it's super important that obviously the data aspect is channeled into those groups, so that way ongoing repeat business can be channeled. But also, this isn't saying, and I don't know in Darden's case, but there are certainly restaurant groups out there that have a relationship, whether it be with an Uber Direct or DoorDash Drive, whereby they also are represented on the marketplace platform as well. And of course, that is charged on top of the and inclusive within the charge that the restaurant is serving. And in that instance, you've then got the piece that becomes a big challenge for the smaller chains and the independents, right? Because nowadays, what we've ended up with is a marketplace with thousands of restaurants on it. And the only way to get to the top of those particular listings is put in some money in your pocket and advertising, whether that be on on certain kind of areas on the website, like new and interesting or particular culinary types. Allows a lot of the bigger groups to stand out, and the smaller guys basically fall down that list. It's an SEO game, right? A search engine
Mhm.
optimization game now. And so for the smaller players, it's almost, well, should I invest more into Google and social media to be able to direct traffic to my own website and drive traffic that way? If they can do that, then yes, they're obviously still able to offer delivery. And the thing I think is most pertinent here is you've got to have a delivery channel in some way, shape, or form. And so partnerships like this are going to help, but it's also about thinking about how the customers are going to discover you in the first place. And that's probably the toughest element for smaller chains and independents.
Okay, we've talked about a lot of technology. You're out there. What new technology has you most excited about? The potential to have a major impact on the industry.
Well, I don't think it's potential. I mean, the generative AI technology is absolutely going to have a huge impact on the industry. As I talked about earlier in reference to the article, I think that certainly is something we should all be excited about. The fact that it's a little difficult, I think, when I speak to executives in the space today, they go, yeah, we absolutely need to do something in this space. And many of them are almost answering that in reference to their board or their shareholders saying, why aren't we doing something on AI? And so therefore, as long as they've got some kind of AI project or they perhaps buy a tech platform that has got some AI feature in it, they feel like they're satisfying that need. That we need to move on from that to a place to be able to say, actually, no. How can we actually reorient your entire business to be able to utilize this? And so when you look at those companies that are starting to develop their own AI models, whether that be, using on top of a foundational model, a better prompt engineering processes, or whether they're using something called retrieval augmented generation, where they're using proprietary data and using a language model to interact with it, or maybe even building their own small language model itself. Those are the areas which I think are going to really show some level of interest. What with the news on DeepSeek recently, that's showing that perhaps the costs of doing these things are actually going to reduce in time, which is therefore going to lower the entry cost for a lot of these companies to be able to start playing into that. And that's exciting. But I'll throw something a little bit more fun because everyone's saying AI right now, Brian. I think if you take that kind of stuff and then overlay augmented reality into it, that I think is going to be really interesting too, right? Could you imagine, for example, an AI model being developed whereby you're seeing tablets or visual goggles as such, seeing what the inventory is with inside your kitchen, and that having some automated workflow to be able to really take out that rather mundane task of ordering from your vendors and suppliers to ensure you've got exactly what you need, and then tying that together, the sales profiles, the weather patterns, the promotional plays that are going out, the digital marketing spend. Again, if you tie all those things together, and then you can tie that into technology that can be deployed, whether it be through handheld devices or cameras inside the kitchen. If these things can come together, we've got a really exciting future ahead of ourselves that will ultimately help us make better, more optimized decisions for our restaurants. And therefore, if we can do that, we can run them more efficiently. If we can do that, we can save a percentage or two from the bottom line. If we can do that, we're going to have a better, stronger industry. That's something to get excited about.
So, Carl, with a couple minutes we have left, love to get into my favorite part of the episode, which is some personal questions. First one, when you were in elementary school, what did you want to do when you grew up?
I wanted to be a journalist. So, in a weird kind of way, what with the podcast and a few of these articles in the book, I kind of done a few things on that front. So, yeah.
Okay, favorite artist or band and favorite concert?
Uh, Favorite artist, probably someone like a Coldplay. Favorite concert, seeing Pink do all her wonderful gymnastic routines across the audience.
Definitely agree with you, Pink. Unbelievable. Saw her in Dubai, 100-degree weather. A poor woman was about to keel over with how active she is. What was your first job?
Um, well, I had my own business at the age of 7 called Job Services, which I charged my family certain prices for different tasks around the house. My brothers particularly liked it. There was one called King Service, which meant I did whatever they wanted for 8 hours of the day. So I washed cars, cleaned their rooms, and stuff like that for a measly 50 pence or something. But hey, I felt I was busy. And then later on, my first technical job was probably being a paper boy, delivering papers up and down large apartment buildings and trying to avoid getting bitten by dogs.
What's your favorite sports team?
After my dear wife Alicia, my second love is my very much troubled Tottenham Hotspur, the EPL team over in England, North London team that I'm hoping one day soon we might win something. But yeah, I do love those guys.
Okay, what's your favorite city and country to visit?
Oh, that's a tough one. There's so many great cities and countries out there. Um, I'm going to say favorite town village if I can, Amalfi. That's where I got married in Italy, and so it would probably be right down there on the Amalfi coastline, just soaking in the atmosphere and of course eating the wonderful food.
What's your favorite activity when you're not working?
Every Saturday morning down here in Orange County, California, I'm down at Corona del Mar playing beach volleyball. I have my own little amateur group and putting on a tournament or two, having a lot of fun with that every Saturday of the year.
Okay, assume you didn't do that when you were back in the UK.
No, you're right. I picked up volleyball in my first stint here, in my first 3 years when I was down in San Diego. Went back to the UK for 8 years, didn't touch a volleyball, and then came back and picked it up again.
Okay, what's your favorite restaurant?
It would probably go back to Hotel Santa Catarina, where Alicia and I got married. Our favorite meal, I think, was probably when we had our test meal before the wedding. It was just stunning. But there are so many places out there, Brian, that even I wouldn't be able to remember the names of. There was one particular one in Thailand, off the shore of Phuket, where we was basically eating off this wooden pontoon. It must have been, I don't know, hundred square feet, and in the middle there was a big hole in it, and they gave you a net, and you'd have to fish out your dinner, and then you'd sit and you'd watch the sunset over the mountains. It was just stunning. Can't tell you the name of it, but that's what it was about.
Next time we get together, we'll have to talk Thailand. I love. Probably didn't even have a name. It was probably just a location, and they pull the fish straight out. I love. We don't have those types of things over here, but know exactly what you're talking about. What are you most proud of in your professional career?
I'm most proud of the people that I've seen grow. I'm a big believer as a leader, your job is to help other people grow and become leaders in their own right. And so when I see the folks that I'd worked with in the past find and grow their own careers into bigger levels of success and achieve their own personal objectives, that is definitely the thing that I take a lot of satisfaction from.
And what's something most people don't know about you?
Oh boy, okay. I use this one a lot, so I'm sure this one will come back to me to bite me at some point. Once upon a time, I got hypnotized on a stage show in Vegas and ended up barking like a dog and trying to jump on my potential. I think there was like a fake owner in the audience. So who knows? If you guys keep on trying and give me a code word, you never know. I might start yapping away like a dog.
Okay, well, Carl, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me to talk about technology and all the fun stuff you're playing around with.
You're very welcome. Really good to see you, Brian. Thanks again for inviting me.
Thanks, and thank you to everyone for joining us. And here's to celebrating the industry we love and serve. Until next time, stay hungry for success.